Hey guys, welcome to part 3 of the Antec Overhaul vlog project. Okay, if you remember in part 2 we were working on the front bezel here. Let's see if I can pop this off. Sorry about that. Okay, what I did was I decided not to mount it onto the chassis of the case itself, just because I wanted to have access to the fans, hard drives, make things a little easier. I didn't like the original hard drive cages in the Antec cases because you did have to go through so much trouble just to change a hard drive or switch it out. So what I did was I mounted it right to the front bezel itself. So you can see the rubber molding all around it, the U-channel type molding. I'll flip this around so you can see. What I did was just take some other scrap pieces of metal from this piece we cut out and just made like some L brackets with it and pop riveted that right to the front panel here to mount it securely. And then I just used some sheet metal screws and drilled 4 small holes in here and used the sheet metal screws to mount it in there. What I wanted to do is keep this as intact as possible. Maybe I'll sell the case eventually, not sure what I'm going to do with it. Maybe whoever does own it eventually wants to switch it back to the original Antec style with the front grills and the hard drive gauges. So I didn't want to do anything too damaging to it so that it couldn't be switched back. So far the only changes we've had to make were the 4 small screws for the mounts on this. But once the screens are on the front again, you wouldn't even be able to see them screw holes are there. So another thing I'm going to do is I noticed on the front here that there's a notch right here where I'm going to run the wires for the fans on the front bezel. See, that gets covered up once you put the bezel on it. So what I'm going to do is make a notch here in the front bezel, and then I can run all of the fan wires down to where the notch is, and then I'll have my plug-in like right down here for all of the fans. So when I pop the front cover off, I can just disconnect that and the fans and all will come off and get out of my way. If you can tell, I'm losing my voice a little bit. I've been a little under the weather. I got as far as cutting the hole for the CPU mounting bracket removal. I think that came out pretty good. One thing I've learned on previous projects was you don't want to really cut a hole into something and then not reinforce it, because these can become flimsy. So what I did is I cut out another piece of metal, cut it out to the shape of the hole itself. I also made some notches in it for where the standoffs were, to make sure that the standoffs will go in without hitting on the plate itself. And then I just pop riveted this onto here. And then on the back side I ground down some of the pop rivets just because they didn't need to be as long as they were sticking out. But that'll give us a nice rigid backing here to keep that motherboard tray from flexing when we work on it. And also I got the hole cut for the bottom for our our power supply fan. I originally cut it out into a 120, thinking that most standard power supplies use that, but I'm going to use my Seed modular power supply in here, and that took 140. So I ended up having to recut it out, and once again getting really close to the edges here on this back plate as well as on the sides, and I didn't want to take out so much metal without doing some reinforcing. So I cut a couple of plates, actually one for the top here and then another one at the bottom, and then I just drilled through it and pop riveted through all 3 pieces of metal, and that way it gives it some really good rigidity right where that power supply is going to sit, and it's not going to make this bottom plate flop around all over the place. But that's about all I've gotten done for updates right now. We do have a lot of finishing work to do. There's some trimming on the holes here as well as on the front bezel itself. When I cut out the spots for the fans. I didn't really clean up the edges and stuff. As you can see, there's a little piece right here, and so basically I got to file all of this stuff out and get rid of all the sharp edges, bad spots there. And also on the hard drive side of it, I kind of made a mess of this, but it's still a work in progress. You can't really see that one, I guess, because of the, there you go. Basically I cut notches here, and what these are going to be for is for our SATA cables to go through SATA power, SATA data, and I put 3 of them here where basically your 3 hard drive cages would normally be for the Antec, so it's kind of right in the middle of each one, and that way you could mount in as many hard drives as you want and still have enough room to run the cables where we can pull them out of the case and run them through the back side here and into the cage, so they won't be up in front by the motherboard. I plan on mounting the hard drives in backwards with the cable connects on the front, so that we won't be able to see any of the cables on the back side. But there was no other really good way to run the cables through here other than making some notches, but once again they're in a spot where it's not going to affect the hard drive cages themselves, so a person could still put the stock cages in there without doing any damage to it. So basically I think we're getting real close to starting to sand this down and get it ready to put some primer on it. I just have some finishing stuff, some finishing grinding and sanding and filing, get rid of some sharp edges, and I think as far as the modding part goes, we've pretty much got it mocked up the way that it's going to be. So hopefully next time you see this I'll have it all cleaned up and ready to get some primer on it. But anyway, that's going to be it for part 3. So stay tuned for the next step and we'll see what it looks like once we get it all primed up and ready for paint. Thanks for watching.